Hello and welcome to In-House Matters by Lawcadia, a series of short, sharp conversations with legal leaders who are improving how teams work. I'm Sasha Kirk, co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer at Lawcadia, and thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about how AI is changing the way legal work gets done and what in-house lawyers need to do differently to stay effective and influential. This will be a candid conversation about leadership, influence, changing expectations of law firms, and the habits and ways of working that will matter most in the years ahead. Today, I'm joined by Archana Acharya, more commonly called Arch, Chief General Counsel at Gallagher Bassett. Arch has built her 25-plus year career across insurance, banking, and financial services, leading legal, governance, and transformation work in complex and highly regulated organisations. Her experience includes significant M&A transactions and business integration, giving her a strong perspective on how the in-house role is shifting. As AI and changing expectations reshape the legal industry, Arch is well placed to share her view and her opinions on what in-house lawyers need to do differently to remain effective, influential, and valuable to the business. Arch, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we get into AI and changing ways of working, can you talk a little about your own career path and how it has shaped your view of what modern in-house leadership requires?
Sure. So the short version is I started my legal career at Clayton Utz in Melbourne, where I did my articles. After that, I went through to various in-house roles. So I worked at Deutsche Bank, ANZ, IAG, AIA, and I even did 3 years in Singapore, where I worked in an offshore oil and gas service company. Along the way, I also picked up some non-legal roles to see what it was like on the other side. But for me, the lure of the law was too strong, and I've returned back to being a lawyer. I'm now at Gallagher Bassett. I've been here 4 years in August. For those unfamiliar with us, we specialise in workers' compensation, general insurance claims management, and NDIS plan management. And my role covers legal, risk, audit, compliance, and I'm also the COSEC. And as to how my experience has shaped what modern in-house leadership looks like, it's funny because when I first started my law career at Clayton Utz, I remember just wanting to be the smartest lawyer, the one that knew everything about the law. And my experience and having worked in various roles across different organisations has made me realise very quickly that skills like your judgment, adaptability, relational skills are equally as important for in-house leaders as legal expertise.
That's really talking to those soft skills, isn't
Yes,
it? Which I think when we're
absolutely.
younger in our careers, we don't give as much weight to. But what you're saying is actually these soft skills are really critical to that leadership as you go forward.
That's right. And I think it probably gives you an indication of maybe how naive I was before starting in
Yeah.
the workplace. And it's also appreciating that it's the combination of both that makes the stronger leader.
AI is changing how legal work is done. I'm curious to hear your perspective about what is really changing for in-house lawyers right now.
I think it's amazing how quickly legal AI has become embedded in our teams. Our team uses AI tools, and it's really important because for a small team like us, it has had significant productivity and efficiency gains. So the work that we're now able to do in-house, where previously we may have had to send that externally to law firms, and also how quickly we're able to turn things around. It's probably no surprise to the audience. We're using it to do contract reviews, extract relevant provisions from contracts, provide summaries, do chronology of events. The list goes on. But I think what's really important and what's shifting is that the work that in-house lawyers doing is changing. For me, I'm seeing that it's less drafting and perhaps a bit more reviewing and judgment, less research that we're doing and more advising. And for me, that makes the role much more interesting. And it's also the case that there were occasions where I know having a blank sheet of paper was my biggest fear because I couldn't start. Whereas now with AI, you can produce a draft in seconds. So there's no more excuses. And I think that's wonderful. Look, we've also experienced where AI has got it wrong and it has hallucinated. And that's why, for me, and something I've shared across the team, and my executives are also of the same view, it's human in the loop controls are essential. That's not optional. Because for us, AI is a tool that is meant to help us with our roles, and ultimately the lawyer is responsible for the accuracy of the advice.
So it's really clear that what is changing is more of a focus on advice, more of a focus on judgment, and that those are the skills that are really elevated. I want to now talk about habits, behaviors, and the ways of working that is changing as AI comes into it. And I think it's an opportunity to examine both sides in terms of what in-house lawyers need to stop doing and then conversely what they need to start doing. So let's start with the first part. What habits and ways of working do in-house lawyers need to rethink or stop doing to stay effective?
Sasha, for me, I think it's stop chasing perfection. I know that I found that really hard when I made the transition from private practice to in-house because you were trained in a certain way. Whereas when you become in-house, you realise that what the business needs is commercially sound legal advice in a very timely manner, not something that is 100% perfect that takes you much longer to provide. Sometimes 80%, 90% is good enough. And that's a big adjustment when you're in-house. Secondly, I'd be saying don't work in isolation. Work with the business, work with the other corporate functions. And for us, it's about engaging early and partnering with them and building proactive relationships. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have those relationships because that's how information comes to you. More often than not, I get it through people just reaching out before it actually becomes a really big issue, which is how I think legal teams should operate. And then being part of the strategic discussions so that you can influence them before having to have decisions made that you have to react to. And I think the last thing would be stop treating technology as something to avoid. There are people who probably be on this call who aren't the best at using technology, and I'd probably categorize myself in that same bucket. But guess what? You don't need to code. All you need to be able to do is understand what AI can do for you and try and lead its adoption within your function. We have someone in our team who is a really great user of AI. It probably helped that he has a tech background and he is the go-to person now in our team when it comes to how best to use the tools, how to use the prompts. And I'm wanting that to be for everyone in the team to be able to reach out to him because then we all learn and we can grow together.
What really stands out for me with what you've said is any productivity time that you've got, any time that's freed up with productivity from AI, focus on those relationships. Build those relationships within the business because that's going to be super valuable and that's going to help you build that greater influence. And part of that is bracing that technology, understanding where, when, and how to be able to leverage it to give you that extra time to be able to build those relationships and drive that commercial advice. You've talked about what they need to stop doing. Now I want to ask what it is that they need to really start doing. And I guess we touched on those relationships. Is there anything else you wanted to add with that?
I think, Sasha, I'll probably be doing now the inverse of what I've said before, but I think it's about using technology and automation to continuously improve your legal delivery. And what I mean by that is if you can automate the routine legal work, the first drafts, the research, you then get the ability to focus on the high value strategic work and the relationships. And one thing that I wish someone had told me earlier in my career is to start advocating for yourself and your development. I think too often, in my case anyway, I was of the belief that if I worked really hard and put in the long hours, my boss would appreciate that really what I wanted to do was get promoted and get recognized. But now that I'm in the other position now as a leader, you go, leaders aren't mind readers. They don't really know what's going on in your heads. So it's up to you to speak up about your goals, your contributions, your ambitions, and also to invest in your leadership capability. So whether that's stakeholder management or coaching, and especially in these times, AI upskilling, to me, it's never too early to start. And I think the other thing that lawyers should be doing, I don't think it's anything different from what they should have been doing now, is really understanding your business and what matters to the business, what's actually going to move the dial. Because that'll help in actually identifying what matters require more investment of your time and what matters just don't.
Touching on what you've said about advocating for yourself, I think that's really critical because it also forces you to be reflective and aware about what it is that you want. Because you can't advocate for yourself without having thoughts and opinions and awareness. So it's really thinking critically about what do I need to grow and then how do I involve others around me, get myself on that path. Is there anything that's helped you in that particular sense?
Sasha, with that, I think having the feedback, because sometimes you're only looking at it through your lens, which in my case was thinking if I worked really hard in these long hours, that would be enough. What you then realize is equally important is actually building the relationships with people. It's actually being able to mentor graduates that are coming through. And this was when I was in private practice. And I really hadn't thought about those areas as being as important as doing the hard yards of actually the legal work. And for me, I think without knowing the full picture of what it takes to actually get to that level, what are they expecting to see, you're operating in a vacuum.
That's absolutely right. As we're talking about the ways of working for in-house lawyers, it's important to put into context what is happening in the broader legal industry. And you've touched on your experience in private practice and working with law firms. How do you think AI is changing what in-house teams expect from their law firms? And what will law firms need to do differently to remain valuable to their clients?
I think now responsiveness is going to be a non-negotiable. There were times when you'd have some law firms that take a long while to come back to you. And I think with legal AI tools, it's harder to justify work that takes longer than it should. A big one for me is transparency on billing. I had a recent example where I received an invoice for double the quoted estimate. And this was without any advance warning, without any justification or explanation. And I think with the proliferation of AI, in-house teams will increasingly expect that those efficiencies will pass to companies in the pricing, and also the invoices should be more predictable. So, we can only hope. And the last one for me is collaborating with us, because AI is also freeing up time that the lawyers are spending on work that they don't necessarily need to, that routine work. And it just gives them a chance also to be able to really understand their client's business. And for me, the best firms, the ones I really like working with, they feel like an extension of our own team. They understand our business, they understand our strategy, and they understand our regulatory environment.
There's no excuses now. There's no excuses for not being responsive, being transparent, passing on those efficiencies. And as you say, collaboration is really key, because that's how they're going to be adding value, and that's how you're going to keep wanting to refer work to them. And it strikes me as something that law firms could be or should be looking at in their own internal systems. If clients are using AI to be reviewing invoices and looking for discrepancies, I'd suspect that they could or should be looking at it from their own end to be able to put that inquiring eye on why things are happening the way they are and looking for ways to do it better.
I know, talking to friends of mine who are in private practice, they are absolutely trying to work out how to harness the technology and still deliver what they need to deliver to clients in a different way. But I think it's like everyone. In-house teams have to adjust, private practice will have to adjust. I still think there's importance for both. It's just maybe the way in which we work needs to be tweaked a bit.
I'm going to ask a question here that's a little bit off the tangent, but it's related to the law firms. And I think it's something that we've spoken about earlier. And
Yes.
I know, talking with other lawyers, they do raise that question as well. What are your thoughts about how the industry as a whole, both in private practice and in-house, support the junior lawyers? Because more and more I see AI taking on the work that a junior lawyer would do. What's your view on how the industry will evolve, or how is it going to support those lawyers?
How I would like it to be would be that I think we've been trained to think that the lawyer's role has been to review the contracts, pull the relevant provisions out, set them out on a table, really understand what that advice is. And AI can do that really quite quickly. So for me, that actually isn't the makings of the lawyer. The reality is, if other people, non-lawyers, actually wanted to look at agreements themselves, they could probably do the same things as well. What I think distinguishes lawyers from others is that our experience and our training has made us be able to exercise judgment. And that is where I think law firms should be focusing on developing their junior lawyers to be able to harness that at much earlier stages than I would have in my career.
And that's going to come through that mentoring and that training and that real focus on development. So perhaps it's a case of accelerating what would normally take about 5 years for someone to develop those skills. With that mentoring, focusing and training and that development, bring it forward.
That's my thinking of it. I actually think that the lawyers, senior associate level lawyers coming through the ranks now, would be significantly more experienced than I would have been when I was a senior associate at that time.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, and time will only tell.
Yes.
But I hope that private practice finds a way through it. Otherwise, I worry that in 5 years' time, there's not going to be enough experienced lawyers to be filling the gap.
I still think that there will always be a need for lawyers. It's funny because my CEO made that comment about if lawyers think that their role really was to pull the clause from the contract, then they've really sold themselves short. And I really like that
Yeah, I
approach
think that's a
because
great phrase.
there's so much more to being a lawyer than that.
So we're going to move on to a different topic now, touching on your really broad experience across your career, where you've worked in different jurisdictions, organisations, and had different responsibilities. How has a non-linear career path strengthened your leadership and judgment?
For me, it's been an enormous impact. Like you've said, I have worked across many industries, different countries, been exposed to different personalities, business models, different cultures. So that has taught me adaptability and being comfortable in uncertainty. I never thought I was one of those people. I thought I never wanted any change. But my career history will give you the indication otherwise because I have had a lot of experience in different organisations. But I think the biggest pivot in my career came when I needed to return from Singapore to Melbourne for personal reasons. And that meant having to turn down a general counsel role that I'd been offered. And when I returned, I had to effectively restart my career as a senior legal counsel back in Melbourne. That was a really humbling time for me, if I'm being honest. I thought that my career was over. And it's funny because now in hindsight, clearly not at that time, but in hindsight, that setback taught me more about resilience and the power of grit. And I swear, grit has to a large extent got me through a lot of things, and it still does. For anyone who's listening, it's just an indication that you may have things that make you go different ways in your career, but all of that is just getting more sort of tools in the armory, I think, the more skills, more resilience, more adaptability, more grit. And I think experience, whether it's linear or not in your career, always helps build judgment. And I don't really think you can teach judgment. It comes from learning on the job, or you can hear from others about their experiences. But in my case, it's come from making mistakes and really learning from those mistakes and trying to make sure again that what I've learned I take forward for the next situation.
You're very grounded in your approach, Arch, and I think being able to have an experience which you described as humbling, but being able to take that and build that growth and that resilience and that grit, and then take what you've learned during that experience to then strengthen you in other parts of your career, I think is a real testament to your character. And then these are all things that we can pass on to others that we work with in that mentoring stage. There's so much value in that. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Sasha, it was probably something, if I'm reflecting on it, something that I'd probably prefer to have hidden. And I think I remember talking to someone about it, and their response was exactly like yours. And that's when I realized if I can actually help somebody or somebody else can get inspiration from it or learn from it, then why wouldn't I share that? I think the reason why it affected me so much is because prior to that point, things in life went pretty easy for me. I'd been able to land the job I wanted, get the promotions I wanted, and that was the first time life didn't go well. And I think, Sasha, at that time, if you'd asked me, I don't think I would have even been able to talk about it. What they say is what wisdom it comes from experience. And I think now looking back, I can actually look at that going, had that not happened, who knows how I would be? Because I think that resilience and that grit, that stuck with me and it will probably be with me for life.
I think sometimes when we look back at our life, whether it's career wise or personal and career, those things that happen that you, at the time, you really wish had not gone that way. But then actually you look back and go, actually, that was a real trigger for things changing. And I can say for me personally, when my son was first born and we lost our visa and then moved here, that was that pivotal experience that then actually was the catalyst for starting Lawcadia. What do you think will distinguish the most effective in-house lawyers over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the skills that make any good lawyer will still remain, which is being able to have that commercial judgment alongside the legal expertise. And I think it's also the ability to be able to communicate easily complex advice or complex matters to the business so that they can make decisions quickly. So that I think is consistent. I'd expect that from lawyers now. The thing that I think will be different though for the next 3 to 5 years is you need to be tech savvy. And for someone like me, it's a little bit daunting, but I'm ready to embrace it for all it's worth and ride the wave, because I think the ability to be able to do your work and get things done and your productivity and have it much faster so you can focus on the things that actually matter, that's the thing that I think lawyers in the next 3 to 5 years will need to be focused on.
I think this is that turning point, isn't it? This is the time where the technology is there, things are going to be changing, and the exchange is going to accelerate from now on.
I think so. I was talking to someone in the team who's currently on parental leave, and this time last year, we may have talked about AI, but it wasn't something that we thought that was actually going to be moving at the pace it is now, that we're actually using it this year.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's a big change just in a period of months.
There's a lot to take on, a lot for lawyers to learn, all of us, not just lawyers, to get up to speed. The world is a changing place. Thank you so much, Arch. That brings us to the end of this episode of In-House Matters by Lawcadia. Thank you for sharing your experiences so openly and so candidly. And thank you to everyone for joining us. If you'd like to continue the conversation or learn more about Lawcadia, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit our website at lawcadia.com.